Welcome to the 5th session of the Caregiver Thrive, Learn, and Connect workshop. Today, we're going to be talking about coping with frustration. Before we do, I have 2 points that I'd like to cover with you. The first is that if you have any questions or concerns as you go through this video for the makeup session, that you reach out to your facilitator who will be happy to work with you. The second is that we're going to be doing different activities throughout this video. During the activity, rather than doing long pauses of silence, what I'll do is encourage you to pause the video while you do the activity and then resume it as you can when you come back. And that way it will make it the most efficient for everyone going forward. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to take a moment and let go of all the worries and concerns that may be weighing on you right now. We're going to take 10 breaths together as we prepare to focus on the new material that you're going to be learning today. So sit comfortably in your chair, close your eyes. Your feet should be flat on the floor and your arms should be supported in a comfortable manner. Try to sit so your shoulders are over your hips, which allow more space for your lungs to expand. Make it a little bit easier to take those deeper breaths. If closing your eyes is difficult, feel free to find a place on the wall and just stare at that during this session. So notice your breathing. Just observe your own breath for a couple of breaths. Now we're going to ask you to slow down your breathing. To slow down, you're going to do a slow inhale through your nose for a count of 5. We'll pause and do a slow exhale through your mouth for the same count. Are you ready? Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. When you're ready, open your eyes, come back to the room. Now everyone is ready. Let's check in and see how your action plans went from last week. So last week, You were asked to either choose from the self-care list to help you identify different areas that you may need to work on, or to choose the top 3 self-care items and integrate those into your schedule, your day-to-day schedule. So hopefully you've been working on this for the past week. If you chose the self-care checklist, what did you notice? Was there one area specifically that you need to work on, or do you need to work on all of them? Did you identify one thing that's stopping you from actually integrating self-care into your list? Do you have a specific attitude or belief? Or is there negative self-talk that is interrupting your ability to provide self-care for yourself? For those of you who chose to do the top 3, again, what did you notice? Were you able to practice a self-care every day? How did that affect you? Do you notice any change? If you weren't able to do that specific self-care, what stopped you from doing it? These are all things to think about as you start to integrate your self-care into your daily life. Remember that your energy as a caregiver is not infinite, that the more that goes out, the more care that you provide to go out, the more energy that takes, the more that you need to be putting back into the well so that you're able to provide that care to others. So self-care is actually vitally important if you do not want to suffer from burnout. So today's topics. We're going to talk about coping with frustration and anger. We'll start with discussing what exactly are these negative emotions. And then we're going to talk about the range of intensity and why knowing where you are in that range is important. And then we're going to explore different strategies to use to manage and what strategies you can use to respond. Positive emotions are those emotions we typically find pleasure in experiencing. Feelings like joy, happiness, love, hope. On the other hand, negative emotions are those emotions we do not find pleasurable to experience. These are feelings like sadness or guilt, anger or frustration. Neither side is good or bad. Emotions serve a purpose. They can urge us to take action. For example, anger can spur a person to hit or even kill someone. Anger can also provide the drive for a person to correct a misjustice that they have experienced. You can stop and think for a moment in this part and really think about how could emotions urge you to take action while you're caregiving? Emotions can also influence decisions we make. For example, we may decide not to participate in an activity if we are feeling sad. And the same thing happens, how can emotions influence your decisions while you're caregiving? If you're angry, how can that spur you to make a different decision than, say, when you're feeling hopeful? There is a difference between how we feel about something, which is an emotion, and what we do with that feeling, which is a reaction. It's important to remember that everyone reacts emotionally to events in different ways. There are a number of factors that encourage us to react in one way or another. Genetics is one thing. So your genes may influence how sensitive you are to emotional information. Biology, right? Specifically, how responsive your limbic and autonomic nervous system is. So your limbic system categorizes emotional experiences as pleasant or unpleasant. Your automatic nervous system regulates your physical response. So that's what? Pulse, blood pressure, breathing, to emotional cues. Environmentally, how responsive you are to that environment, right? How bright are the lights? Did you get enough sleep the night before? How hot or how cold it is, all affects how you react to things. There are also situational factors. Is this situation dangerous? Has it happened before? So responses change over time. You may not react the first time, but the 5th time or the 10th time, you may react. So not only does the factors change from person to person, but they can also change for the same person from situation to situation. It's important to note that most emotions come and go. If you feel stuck in the same negative emotion for a long time and finds it affects your ability to do things you normally do, then you may want to actually seek some professional help by working with a mental health provider. So there are 3 parts to emotions. So think of it this way. 3 different parts to show how someone experiences an emotion. The first is how you feel the emotion. For example, I feel angry. The second is how your body reacts to the emotion. My fists are clenched, my brow is scrunched, my shoulders are tense. And finally, how you behave in response to the emotion. I yell, some people may cry, some people may kick or punch. Your body can serve as an early warning sign to clue you in on what emotion you're experiencing. Our target is not to change the fact that you feel an emotion, but how you behave in reaction to that emotion. Although caregivers do experience other negative emotions such as sadness, guilt, and blame, today our focus is going to be on frustration and how it turns into anger that interferes with your ability to provide care. As you get towards the right side of our screen, the more primitive the emotion is, and the easier it is to slip into uncharacteristic behaviors. Sometimes you can hear this described as being on a railroad track, right? There isn't a lot of deviation from that rail. As we discuss the range of anger, or we discuss this range of anger because once you're experiencing furious, it's hard to reason yourself out of it. And if y'all think about the last time you were absolutely furious at something, usually rational thought at this point isn't your strong suit. Where you are in the range will also help you to decide which is the best method to use to return to being calm. So let's take another look at these emotions in the range. So calm is being free of any strong emotion. The next step up is annoyed. You're feeling slightly angry or maybe irritated. The next step up is being upset. You're feeling unhappy, perhaps disappointed or worried. Next step is frustrated, feeling distressed due to the inability to change or achieve something. Then you're angry. which is a strong feeling, experience when you feel someone has done you wrong, right? You're betrayed in some way. And then furious, that's that feeling of wild, intense anger. So how do you know where you are in this range? So we come to our first activity of the day. Amazingly, some people just know. For those that don't know where they are in the range, your body can give you a clue. So we're not going to ask you to share this information. It's really private and it's only for your use. For many of you, you may never have been asked to think about your emotions in this way, and it can prove difficult. We ask that you stick with it, as this information is very important for you, as it can help you to figure out what's the best strategy to use to manage your response to the emotion in the range. So you should have a copy of your handout. If not, you can use a pen and paper and follow along with what's on the screen. If you want to pause the video now and go get your handout, that's fine. So if you take a look, you can see we have 2 rows and a bunch of different columns that are headed by the different emotions. So in the first row, we have, what do you tell yourself? If you think back to our last session, you know that we have a certain level of self-talk that we do all the time. Becoming aware of that can be one way you can cue in to where you are on that intensity range. Where do you feel it in your body is the second row. And that is your physical cues to how you're experiencing the emotion. Everybody can experience the cues at different times. Just because your neighbor clenches their fist when they're upset doesn't mean that you will. So it's important to really touch base with when you experience these emotions, what is happening in your body at that precise moment. So let's go to the first row. What do you tell yourself? So we all tell ourselves things when we experience strong emotions. When we're calm, we may say something to ourselves like, hey, life is really good right now. We note that in our body, our shoulders are relaxed, our breathing is measured, neither fast nor slow, and we may even be smiling. On the other hand, when we are furious, we may say things like, oh, I'm so angry, or I hate this. Our body can feel tight and tense. Our fists are clenched. Our face may feel hot. We may be scowling. Look at the form in your packet titled Anger Mapping. You're going to note there are emotions across the top, and on the left, there are 2 separate categories. Today, we're going to start with furious, and we're going to give you 2 minutes to write down where you feel it in your body. So go ahead, stop and think about the last time you were super furious. Pause the video and write down where you felt it in your body. Were your fists clenched? What was happening? Okay, now that you've got that down, we want you to think about what you tend to tell yourself when you're furious. Is there something that you say to yourself? Is there something that you tend to think when you're furious? He's doing this on purpose. I can't take this anymore. Go ahead and pause the video and write that in. Okay. Now I'd like you to do the same thing for frustrated. First, write down think about it at that last episode when you were frustrated. Where did you feel it in your body? And go ahead and write that down. What did you tell yourself when you were frustrated? Were there certain phrases that went through your mind or certain things that you tend to tell yourself when you're frustrated? Go ahead and pause the video and write those two things down. Okay. Now I'm going to have you do the same thing for annoyed. Again, pause the video, write down where do you feel it in your body and what do you tell yourself when you're annoyed? Okay, welcome back. Let's do calm now. When you're calm, what's happening in your body? Or maybe what isn't happening in your body, if that's easier for you to think of it that way. What do you tell yourself when you're calm? Just go ahead and pause it, write those in, and then resume the video when you're done. What we're thinking and what our bodies tell us are both clues to where we are in the range of anger. So today, during this session, you wrote out for furious, frustrated, annoyed, and calm. When you get a chance later, you may want to also do angry and upset, because all of these are important stops and will help to clue you in on what strategy that you're going to use. So our first strategy is take 10 breaths. Now we've just did that at the beginning. I'm not going to have you do it again. But like stress, where we first taught this, many of the emotions experienced in this range can be perceived as a threat to our brain, which will in turn trigger the fight or flight response. If you remember, the first response you perceive is faster breathing. The same skill we taught you to slow your breathing works well here. Taking 10 deep breaths tells your mind and body to stand down and is the foundation for allowing a response rather than a reaction. It calms the mind and body and gives you space to remember the disease and its contribution. The next strategy that we're going to talk about is dealing with the self-talk. In our minds, there's usually a running commentary on our actions. For some, it may sound like someone from our childhood, supporting us, criticizing us, even mocking us sometimes. That voice can remind us of our standards, or it can be very mean. Many times we are routinely meaner to ourselves than we would ever be to another person. These voices have been a part of who we are since childhood, and for many have become part of the background noise, listened to, but not consciously heard. We want you to become aware of what is being said again and take back control of what you tell yourself. So we're going to do our next activity. All right. These statements that we're going to talk about are common responses caregivers may tell themselves. Let's spend a moment and rewrite this internal script. So, Susie is on a time schedule to get to an important appointment on time. Her husband, who has moderate stage dementia, is being incredibly difficult. She finds herself feeling increasingly frustrated and tells herself, I just can't do this anymore. What do you think happened next? Do you think it made the situation better or worse? What she told herself. What else could she have said to herself? Right? What if she said something like, okay, I know this is I know I'm really frustrated right now. I know this is feeling really overwhelming, but I can handle it. Do you think that would change what happened next? So, what do you think happened in this scenario? Do you think she went on to make that appointment? Do you think maybe yelling occurred? And especially with the I can't do this anymore? So, what you tell yourself affects the outcome. Let's look at another scenario. Betty and Robert have been married a long time. Early in their marriage, after a series of very heated arguments, they decided it wouldn't be fair for Robert to use Betty's mom in an argument. Despite the fact that this agreement has kept the peace in their marriage for the last 40 years, all of a sudden, Robert, who has been recently diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, is using her mom in arguments again. Betty thinks he's doing this on purpose. He knows it makes me angry. What do you think happened next when she tells herself this? Probably that they're arguing more, right? And that the arguments are getting more intense. What else could she tell herself? What if she told herself something like, it's the disease causing this behavior. It's not his fault. Right? So what do you think how that would affect the actual problem? Right? So maybe Betty doesn't respond to the comments that he's making, and the arguments aren't quite as hurtful to her because she knows it's not him saying it, but it's the disease causing it. So at this point, monitoring your self-talk and understanding that what you tell yourself matters. Do you think this is something that you can do? Right? Is this something you can step back and see yourself going, okay, yeah, I know this is, what's happening. I don't think it's done on purpose, or I don't, that I can do this. These are things that, it's important to start small. The first thing you want to do is just listen for the self-talk. What are you telling yourself? What does it say? If it's not supportive, you need to replace it with something more positive. Remember that negative self-talk can push your emotions up the range, and positive self-talk can calm and give you some space to actually respond rather than react. Caregiving is a hard job. Support is important, including your own support for you. Another strategy is something called stop. Sometimes it just happens. Despite all the precautions you put in place, you find yourself in that moment when you are reacting rather than responding. When you find yourself getting angry, right, at that far right side, one method you can use to calm yourself down is stop. S means stop. T means take 10 breaths. O is observe what's happening in me. P is to proceed differently. So stop means exactly what you think it does. Stop whatever it is you're doing in that moment. If you were about to say something, don't say it. If you were about to do something, don't do it. Take 10 breaths means right after you stop, you take a minute, do 10 slow breaths. Physically, you're sending that signal to your body to stand down. Observe gives you the space to actually see what is happening so that you can respond rather than react. Gives you the time to observe what you're saying to yourself, time to craft another response. Because you've done the work of earlier, noting what you tend to tell yourself and practice telling yourself more positive statements, it'll be easier in the moment to tell yourself something like, no, he isn't doing this on purpose. It's the disease making him say that. Perceive differently means moving forward using this new information. We'll talk about this in a moment. If you find yourself angry or frustrated and reacting emotionally often, making a small card with stop info on it to refer to can be a helpful reminder on what the steps are. So proceed differently. Knowing where you are in the range is important for knowing how to respond. Are you annoyed or upset, frustrated, angry, or furious? If you're annoyed or upset, you can change the self-talk, right? You've practiced that, so you know what to replace it with. It's important to find the humor in this situation. Humor has more power than you think it has to diffuse situations like this. Humor can help you to reframe problems that might otherwise seem overwhelming. If you are frustrated, you can change the self-talk. Again, you've practiced it, so you have something ready to use. You can also take 10 breaths, remembering that you're resetting your physical body to calm down. If you're angry or furious, you can walk away. Take yourself away from whatever it is to making you that angry. You can try taking 10 breaths. Most likely, if you're at this level of the intensity range, you're probably going to need more than one set. So you may be taking 20 or 30 or 40 breaths. You can exercise your anger away. And what do I mean by this? Some people describe this type of anger as having a spiky energy to it that won't let them calm down. Exercise. For many women, it can be vigorous housekeeping. Can be a pretty effective way of dealing with this spiky energy. Just getting out, moving, and doing something. That's the chopping the firewood, the anything that can allow you to be vigorous in your movement. Wait to re-engage until calmer, and this is very important. Do not re-engage while still angry. As you calm down, watch for the negative self-talk that is feeding that anger and change that self-talk. So filling out that anger mapping form can help you find the clues needed to know where you are in the range, and thus needing to know what you can do to change and proceed differently, right? Whether it's that changing that self-talk, taking those 10 breaths, walking away, all of these depend on you knowing where you are in that range of anger. So the takeaway from today's session is that both positive and negative emotions are a normal part of caregiving. Remember that emotions have 3 parts. One part how you feel, one part how your body reacts, and one part how you behave. There are different ways to proceed depending on how angry you are. And you know how angry you are by clues both in your body and clues in what you tell yourself. One very effective method of dealing with anger or being furious is to do the stop. And that's stop what you're doing, take 10 breaths, observe what's happening, and proceed differently. And that gives you that space to respond rather than react when you're angry. Okay. Finally, what we're going to do today is we're going to do an action plan. I'm going to encourage you to go find a pen and paper and pull it out. You can stop the video until that point. First step I'm going to encourage you to do is pick one of the 3 that are there. So you can either practice your deep breathing, because if you haven't been doing that so far, this is a great opportunity to pick up that practice. You can go ahead and do the anger mapping, right? Become aware of your self-talk. Track it for a week. and practice finding alternatives. Or 3, you can use stop during a situation where you were mildly or moderately angry. I would start at the mild side until you get the rhythm of how to use stop most effectively. And then depending on where you are, proceed up until the more intense situations. So once you've picked one of these 3, go ahead and write it at the top of your page. Because remember, a written plan is much more likely to be followed than one that you keep in your mind. So the first step is to set a deadline. And this is the deadline for when you're going to start and finish this goal. It's important to be realistic when you think about your deadlines. So go ahead, take a moment, figure out when you're going to start this practice. Second step is why this one? The more personal you can make it, the more likely it is to push you to actually complete this task. Third step is, what are you going to pair it with? Research tells us that piggybacking a new task onto something you already do routinely and consistently is a great way to jumpstart something new. It becomes an automatic reminder to do the new task. So you may find yourself really intentionally meaning to do this activity, but for some reason it just doesn't seem to happen. One reason it doesn't happen is sometimes it can feel huge trying to add this to your schedule. If that's the case, then I recommend you take this task and you break it down into steps. When are you going to become aware of your self-talk? How are you going to track it? How are you going to practice finding alternatives? Right? So by making these a bunch of individual goals, you're much more likely, all you have to do is focus on the next goal rather than on the larger task. So that is something that you can do to address if you find yourself not actually doing these, even though you have all the intention in the world to actually do them. Final is setting up some kind of reminder system for you. Whether you do so electronically or you do so physically, either way, you do you, whatever works best for you is what's important. If it's electronically, our smartphones come with a variety of different ways of setting alarms for ourselves. You can email yourself a note, you can text yourself a note. All of these things are reminders that you can use. Another way, if you want a physical reminder, you can use Post-it notes. You can tape this action plan to your mirror so you see it and you remember it. There are a variety of different ways that you can set yourself up for reminders. Figure out what works for you and then continue to use it. Now, you may run into problems getting it done. And if that's the case, it's important to figure out what the issue actually is. Is it you didn't give yourself enough reminders or the right kind of reminders? Maybe when you set your deadline, you said you were going to do it first thing in the morning, starting tomorrow, and it turns out your mornings are crazy chaotic and there's no way to put another thing in there. So you need to figure out a different time to do it. Maybe the thing that you thought you did consistently, maybe it wasn't as consistent as you thought it was. So you need to pair it with something different. Once you identify the issue, it's so much more easier to actually brainstorm solutions. So ID the issue, brainstorm a bunch of solutions, and then pick one and try it out. If it works, great, you're done. If it doesn't work, then you need to go back to the solutions that you had brainstormed previously and go ahead and figure out and try a new one out. The important thing to remember is, much like an exercise class that you watch from the couch, if you don't actually do these skills and practice these skills, then they don't become part of your everyday solutions, right? We only use things we feel confident in. We don't feel confident in them till we practice them. So you can watch and listen to us talk about it, but until you actually take it home and practice it, you probably won't use it. And if you don't use it, you won't get as much benefit from this class as you would have otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and switch because I really would like you to see how this works. So part of the program that we offer is a website. This website is CaregiverTLC.org. If you come here and you select participants, you have access to a page that's just for you. You have a password called CARE, C-A-R-E, all lowercase. Go ahead and put that in and hit submit, and it comes up to this page. There's a little bit of a welcome that tells you a little bit about the program, an overview of the research program, so you know exactly what's coming up and what's next, a little bit of information about the workshop itself. It has a summary of each of the sessions. You can access electronic copies of all the materials off this webpage, as well as additional copies of the handouts. All 6 videos of each session will be up here in case you want to review any of these, or if you need to do a makeup session like you're doing right now. And then finally, there is resources that are broken up by the different sessions. If we go to today's Coping with Frustration, there are a lot of information about the topics that we covered in session. There are videos, there are articles, there are websites. So there are a bunch of different things that can give you more information about things that we talked about, because I know sometimes we go through very, very fast. So if you wanted to read a little bit more about any of this information, you're more than welcome to come over and check it out. So I'd like to thank you for attending in this session and doing your makeup. If you have any questions, I'll remind you that you can definitely reach out to your facilitator, who is more than happy to work with you and answer any questions or concerns that you may have. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.